My name is Alexandra, and I am 28 years old. From my window, I can see my twin boys playing in our private garden. 3 years ago, I was homeless, pregnant, and betrayed by everyone I loved. My parents chose to believe the worst about me and threw me out without a second thought. They had no idea I was carrying a billionaire's children. Life has a funny way of coming full circle. Now they stand at my door desperate and broken. If you are watching this, let me know where you are from in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories that will change how you see family bonds forever. I grew up in a middle-class suburb in Connecticut. My parents, Robert and Diana Miller, were not the affectionate type. They showed their love through expectations, not hugs or words of encouragement. Millers do not settle for mediocrity, my father would remind me constantly. My older brother Thomas, however, seemed exempt from the crushing pressure I lived under. He was the golden child, the son who could do no wrong. Our house was comfortable but cold. Every achievement was met with a nod and a quick end of "oh. That is what we expect from you." Every mistake was dissected at the dinner table. I learned early on that emotional vulnerability was a weakness in our household. School was not easy for me. Unlike Thomas, who breezed through with perfect grades and athletic scholarships, I struggled with mathematics and sciences. This was unacceptable to my father, an engineer who could not understand why his daughter found calculus challenging. My mother, a former elementary school teacher, spent hours drilling me at the kitchen table, her patience wearing thinner with each mistake. "Alexandra, focus. Your brother never needed this much help," she would say, the comparison cutting deeper than she knew. Despite the difficulties, I found my strength in economics and business classes. Numbers made sense when they represented real-world applications. I worked twice as hard as my classmates, staying up late to study while my friends went to parties. The hard work paid off when I was accepted to Boston University with a partial scholarship. My parents acknowledged this with their typical restraint. "Good. Now prove you deserve to be there," my father said. College was liberating. For the first time, I was away from the constant comparisons to Thomas. I flourished in my business and economics courses, graduating with honors. My graduation day was one of the few times I saw a genuine smile on my father's face, though it disappeared quickly when Thomas announced his promotion at his investment firm during my celebration dinner. After graduation, I landed a position at Wellington Financial, a prestigious firm in Boston. My starting salary was modest, but the potential for growth was enormous. I rented a small apartment, bought professional clothes I could barely afford, and threw myself into building my career. My parents seemed pleased that I had found a respectable job, though they still asked when I would pursue an MBA like Thomas. 6 months into my job, everything changed. Our firm was hosting a gala for potential investors, and all employees were expected to attend and make a good impression. That night, wearing a black dress I had splurged on, I was assigned to greet guests and direct them to the appropriate executives. "Excuse me, could you point me toward Edward Wellington?" a deep voice asked. I turned and found myself looking up at one of the most attractive men I had ever seen. Tall, with dark hair and striking gray eyes, he wore a tailored suit that screamed wealth without being ostentatious. "Of course, mister," I trailed off, waiting for his name. Ethan Blake," he said with a smile that transformed his serious face. I recognized the name immediately. Ethan Blake, 32-year-old tech genius and founder of Blake Innovations, a company valued at billions. His face occasionally appeared in business magazines, but he was known for being intensely private. "Right this way, Mr. Blake. Mr. Wellington is eager to meet with you," I said, professionally leading him through the crowded room. "And you are?" he asked, his eyes never leaving mine. "Alexandra Miller. I am a junior financial analyst here," I replied. "Well, Alexandra Miller, perhaps you could give me your analysis of Wellington's new investment strategy. I value fresh perspectives," he said. What I thought would be a brief, polite conversation turned into an hour of discussing market trends and investment opportunities. Ethan listened intently to my views, asking insightful questions that challenged my thinking. By the end of the evening, he had given me his personal business card. "I would like to continue this conversation over dinner sometime," he said. "Your insights are refreshing." I was flattered but cautious. Men in positions of power asking junior employees to dinner often had motives beyond professional development. But something about Ethan seemed genuine. After consulting with my roommate Rachel, I agreed to meet him at a respected restaurant where we continued our discussion about market trends. That dinner led to another, and soon our conversations expanded beyond finance to books, films, and our personal lives. Ethan was intensely private about his company and wealth, preferring to ask about my family and aspirations. When I shared stories about growing up with my demanding parents, he listened with genuine interest. My father was similar, he confided during our fourth dinner together. Nothing was ever good enough. It drove me to succeed, but at a cost. 3 months after our first meeting, Ethan kissed me goodnight after walking me to my apartment. Our relationship evolved naturally, but we kept it private. Ethan was concerned about media attention and how it might affect both of us. The press would turn you into a gold digger and me into a cliché, he explained. I value what we have too much to subject it to that scrutiny. I agreed, appreciating our privacy. We settled into a comfortable routine. Weeknight dinners at my apartment or secluded restaurants, weekend trips to his lake house, or to cities where we were unlikely to be recognized. Ethan was attentive and generous without being showy. He valued my opinions and encouraged my career ambitions. For 8 months, I lived in a bubble of happiness. My work was going well, my relationship with Ethan was deepening, and for once I felt truly valued for who I was. I even began to imagine a future together, though we never explicitly discussed marriage or children. Then, everything changed with 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. The morning sickness hit me first. I attributed it to stress or perhaps food poisoning, but after a week of waking up nauseated, a different possibility entered my mind. I purchased a pregnancy test on my lunch break, my hands shaking as I paid the cashier. Back in the office bathroom, I waited those agonizing 3 minutes staring at the ceiling and calculating dates in my head. When I finally looked down, 2 pink lines stared back at me. Pregnant. Despite our precautions, despite the birth control pills I took religiously, I was pregnant. My first reaction was pure panic. Ethan and I had never discussed children. Our relationship, while serious, was still relatively new. How would he react? Would this change everything between us? Would he think I had trapped him? I spent the next 3 days in a fog, going through the motions at work while my mind raced with possibilities. I knew I wanted this baby. Despite the unexpected timing, a sense of maternal protectiveness had already taken root, but I was also terrified of losing Ethan. Finally, during our Friday night dinner at his penthouse, I gathered my courage. Ethan, there is something I need to tell you, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He looked up from his wine glass, his expression curious. You sound serious. Everything okay? I am pregnant, I said, simply watching his face carefully. The transformation was immediate. His relaxed expression froze, then shifted to shock, then something I could not quite read. He set down his wine glass with deliberate care. You are certain? He asked, his voice controlled. I nodded. 3 tests, all positive. Ethan stood abruptly and walked to the window, his back to me. The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. This is unexpected, he finally said, still not looking at me. The timing could not be worse. Not exactly the response I had hoped for, but not outright rejection either. I know it is not what we planned, I began. He turned to face me, then his expression troubled. You do not understand, Alexandra. The board is finalizing a merger with Technos International next month. If news of this pregnancy leaks, the media frenzy could jeopardize everything. Years of work, billions in value. His concerns were about business implications, not about us, not about the baby. My heart sank. No one needs to know right away, I offered. We can keep this private until after your merger. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I knew meant he was deeply stressed. It is not that simple. The Technos family is extremely conservative. Any hint of scandal could send them running to our competitors. He paced the room, thinking aloud. I need time to figure this out, to plan the announcement carefully. So you are not upset about the baby itself? I asked cautiously. He paused, seeming to really see me for the first time since my announcement. No, not upset, just blindsided. I need some time, Alexandra. Can you give me that? I nodded, relieved that he had not immediately rejected the idea of becoming a father. Of course. Take whatever time you need. Ethan kissed me goodbye that night with reassurances that he just needed to process everything. I left his penthouse feeling cautiously optimistic. Yes, his reaction had been focused on business concerns, but that was understandable given what was at stake with the merger. Once he had time to adjust to the idea, surely he would see this baby as the blessing I already did. But days passed without word from him. My texts received brief non-committal responses. Our usual dinner plans were canceled due to emergency meetings. When we did speak on the phone, he sounded distant, distracted. 2 weeks after I shared my news, I received an email from Human Resources requesting a meeting. Confused but unsuspecting, I arrived to find the head of HR and my direct supervisor waiting with somber expressions. Due to departmental restructuring, we have to eliminate several positions, including yours, the HR director explained, sliding a severance package across the table. Your contribution has been valued, but business needs have changed. The timing was too coincidental. Wellington Financial had just announced record profits. There was no logical reason for layoffs. As I cleaned out my desk, the cold reality settled in. Ethan had arranged this. Whether to remove complications from his professional life or to distance himself from me, the result was the same. I was unemployed, pregnant, and apparently alone. That evening, I tried calling Ethan repeatedly. My calls went straight to voicemail. Emails bounced back. Text messages remained undelivered. I had been completely cut off. In desperation, I took a taxi to his penthouse building. The doorman who had come to know me over the months looked uncomfortable. "I am sorry, Miss Miller. Mr. Blake has left explicit instructions that no visitors are to be allowed up without prior approval," he said apologetically. "Please just call up and tell him I am here," I begged. The doorman made the call, his expression growing more uncomfortable as he listened to the response. "I am very sorry. Mr. Blake says he is unavailable and asks that you respect his privacy." Tears of humiliation burned my eyes as I turned to leave. Outside rain had started to fall, matching my mood perfectly. I was walking toward the subway when a black town car pulled alongside me. The window lowered to reveal a middle-aged woman I recognized as Ethan's personal assistant, Margaret. "Miss Miller, please get in. We need to talk," she said. Desperate for any connection to Ethan, I complied. Inside the warm car, Margaret handed me an envelope. "Mr. Blake asked me to deliver this to you," she said, her tone professionally detached. Inside the envelope was a cashier's check for $500,000 and a legal document. As I skimmed the dense legal text, my stomach turned. It was a non-disclosure agreement combined with a statement releasing Ethan from all parental responsibilities and claims. "He wants to buy me off," I whispered, the betrayal cutting deeper than I could have imagined. "Mr. Blake believes this is the most reasonable solution for all parties," Margaret replied without emotion. "The amount is generous and will provide for both you and the child. In return, you agree never to contact him or publicly identify him as the father." I stared at the check, tears blurring my vision. This was what I was worth to him. This was what our child was worth. A transaction. A problem to be solved with money. "Tell Ethan he can keep his money," I said, ripping the check in half and returning it along with the unsigned agreement. "I do not want anything from him. Not anymore." Margaret seemed genuinely surprised by my refusal. "Miss Miller, please reconsider your situation." "My situation is that I am having a baby whose father is a coward," I interrupted. "I would rather struggle than take his blood money." As I exited the car into the rain, Margaret called after me. "The offer remains open should you change your mind." I walked for hours that night, the rain soaking through my clothes. My life had imploded in the span of 2 weeks. I had lost my job, my boyfriend, my security, but I still had my dignity and my baby. That would have to be enough. With my savings rapidly depleting and no job prospects on the horizon, I made the difficult decision to return to my parents' home in Connecticut. I had not told them about my pregnancy yet, hoping to secure employment first, so I could present my situation from a position of relative strength. But with each passing day, that hope dimmed. The drive to my childhood home felt like a journey backward in time and status. I rehearsed different versions of my announcement, trying to find words that would soften the blow. My parents were traditional and judgmental, but they were family. Surely they would not turn their backs on their daughter and grandchild in need. My mother answered the door, her initial smile of greeting fading as she took in my appearance. I had lost weight despite the pregnancy, and the stress of recent weeks had left dark circles under my eyes. "Alexandra, we were not expecting you," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "Is everything all right?" "I need to talk to you and Dad," I replied, stepping into the familiar foyer that now felt alien. My father was in his study, reading glasses perched on his nose, as he reviewed some document. He looked up with mild surprise when we entered. "Alexandra, this is unexpected," he said, setting aside his papers. "Is it a holiday I have forgotten?" "No, Dad. I need to talk to you both," I repeated, lowering myself into one of the leather chairs across from his desk. My mother took the other chair, her posture rigid with concern. "What is it, dear? You look unwell." I took a deep breath and decided direct honesty was the only approach. "I lost my job 2 weeks ago, and I am pregnant." The silence that followed was deafening. My father removed his reading glasses slowly, deliberately, his expression hardening. "I see," he said finally, his voice icy. "And the father?" I swallowed hard. "He is not in the picture anymore." "Who is he?" my mother demanded. "Someone from your workplace. Is that why you lost your job?" I could not bring myself to name Ethan to explain the complicated truth that would sound like a fantasy or a lie. It does not matter who he is. He has made it clear he wants nothing to do with me or the baby. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "So you come crawling back to us. After we invested everything in your education, set you up with a respectable career, and this is how you repay us. With an illegitimate grandchild and no means of support." His words stung, but I had anticipated this reaction. "I am not asking for handouts. I just need a place to stay while I find another job. Once I am back on my feet." "Do you have any idea what this will do to our reputation?" my mother interrupted, her voice trembling. "The Millers have been respected in this community for generations. Now our daughter returns home pregnant and abandoned." "I was not abandoned, Mom. I made a choice to have this baby, to stand on my own." "A foolish choice," my father snapped. "What kind of life can you provide for a child as a single mother with no job?" Before I could answer, the front door opened and closed, followed by my brother's voice calling out, "Mom, Dad, whose car is outside?" Thomas appeared at the study door, his expression changing from curiosity to something like satisfaction when he saw me. Well, the prodigal daughter returns. What happened? Alex's big city life not working out." There had always been tension between Thomas and me, but his tone now carried a new edge of malice that took me by surprise. "Alexandra is pregnant," my mother announced bluntly. "And apparently unemployed." Thomas's eyebrows shot up, but the surprise in his expression seemed forced theatrical. "Pregnant, wow. That is unexpected." "The father has abandoned her," my father added grimly. Thomas leaned against the doorframe, studying me with a smirk. Actually, that might not be the whole story. All eyes turned to him. My heart began to race. "What do you mean?" my mother asked. "I ran into Jessica last week," Thomas said, casually, referring to his ex-girlfriend who had worked briefly at Wellington Financial before I joined. "She still has friends at your company. According to her, there have been rumors about you for months." "Rumors?" my father demanded. "What kind of rumors?" Thomas shrugged, the picture of false reluctance. "That Alex has been friendly with several executives. Very friendly. Apparently it was quite the office scandal." My mouth fell open in shock. "That is a complete lie." Jessica said everyone knew. Thomas continued, ignoring my protest. "She said people were taking bets on which executive was the father." "That is not true. I was in a committed relationship. There was only one man," I insisted, tears of rage and betrayal filling my eyes. "Then who is he?" my mother pressed. "Why will you not tell us his name?" "Because it does not matter. He does not want to be involved, and I have accepted that." Or perhaps Thomas suggested with cruel precision, "You simply do not know which one is the father." Thomas the first gasped, stunned by the viciousness of his accusation. But the damage was done. I could see in my parents' eyes that they believed him. My mother's face had crumpled into an expression of disgusted disappointment. My father stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I will not have this disgrace under my roof," he declared. You have 24 hours to collect any belongings you left here and find other accommodations. Dad, please, I begged, rising to face him. I am your daughter. This is your grandchild. A grandchild whose paternity is in question is no grandchild of mine, he replied coldly. You have made your choices, Alexandra. Now you must live with them. Mom, I turned to her desperately. She would not meet my eyes. Your father is right. You have brought shame to this family. Until you are ready to tell us the truth and make this right, I think it is best if you go. Somehow, I made it upstairs to my old bedroom, where I collapsed onto the twin bed and sobbed until I had no tears left. How had my life disintegrated so completely? 8 weeks ago, I had a successful career, a loving relationship, and a future full of promise. Now I was pregnant, jobless, and disowned by my own family. That night, unable to sleep, I crept downstairs for water and overheard voices from the den. Pausing in the hallway, I recognized Thomas's voice, and surprisingly, the voice of his ex-girlfriend, Jessica. They bought it completely, Thomas was saying, a note of triumph in his voice. You should have seen their faces. Did she deny it? Jessica asked. Of course, but it was too late. Once I mentioned the office rumors, they were convinced she was lying. Good, Jessica replied with satisfaction. She deserves it after stealing that promotion from me. Little Miss Perfect with her fancy degree and connections. I never could stand how Mom and Dad fawned over her achievements, Thomas added bitterly. Always Alexandra this, Alexandra that. Now they know what she really is. Except none of it is true, Jessica laughed. Your sister was probably the most boring employee at Wellington. I doubt she even knew how to flirt with the executives. Their laughter echoed in the hallway as I stood frozen, the pieces falling into place. My own brother had deliberately destroyed my reputation with our parents. He had conspired with his bitter ex to create lies about me during the most vulnerable time of my life. And my parents had believed these lies without question, without giving me the benefit of the doubt. I retreated silently to my room, a cold resolve replacing my earlier despair. These people were not the family I needed. If they could turn on me so easily, believe the worst about me without evidence, then perhaps I was better off without them. In the morning, I packed my remaining belongings into my car while my parents silently ate breakfast, pointedly ignoring my presence. Thomas watched from the stairs with barely concealed satisfaction. As I placed the last box in my trunk, my mother approached, arms crossed defensively. Where will you go? She asked, a flicker of concern breaking through her rigid disapproval. Does it matter? I replied quietly. You have made it clear I am no longer welcome in this family. When you are ready to admit the truth and make better choices, perhaps we can revisit this situation, she offered stiffly. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized something that broke my heart anew. She wanted to believe the lies. It was easier for her to accept that I was promiscuous and irresponsible than to consider that I might be a victim of circumstance, that I might need her unconditional support. Goodbye, Mom, I said, simply getting into my car. As I drove away from my childhood home, I glanced in the rearview mirror. My mother stood motionless in the driveway, my father now beside her. Thomas had joined them, his arm around our mother's shoulders in a show of support that made me feel physically ill. In the span of 1 month, I had lost everything and everyone I thought I could count on. But as one hand instinctively moved to my still flat abdomen, I knew I was not truly alone. I had my baby. And somehow we would make it through this together. Finding affordable housing while unemployed and pregnant proved nearly impossible. After a week in a budget motel that devoured my dwindling savings, I managed to secure a tiny studio apartment in a neighborhood that made me double-check the locks each night. The building was run down, the neighbors noisy, but the landlord did not care about my employment status as long as I paid 3 months' rent in advance. Job hunting was an exercise in frustration. Though I never mentioned my pregnancy in interviews, the financial sector was small enough that rumors had spread. Several interviewers made thinly veiled references to my situation at Wellington, suggesting that I might not be a good cultural fit for their organization. After 24 rejections, I expanded my search beyond finance. A small accounting firm finally offered me a position with modest pay and no benefits, but I grabbed it gratefully. The owner, Mrs. Chen, was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who cared more about competence than gossip. I need someone who can balance books and handle client calls, she told me bluntly during my interview. Your personal life is your business, as long as your work is accurate. My tiny apartment was on the third floor of a building with no elevator, which became increasingly challenging as my pregnancy progressed. By my 4th month, the daily climb left me winded and aching. That was when I met Rachel Diaz, my neighbor across the hall. "You look like you could use a hand," she said one evening as I struggled with groceries. Without waiting for a response, she took 2 bags from my arms and followed me to my door. Rachel was a nurse at the local hospital working night shifts in the emergency room. Our opposite schedules meant we rarely saw each other, but she made a point of checking on me when our paths crossed. She was the first person since my arrival who showed genuine kindness without judgment. "My sister was a single mom," she explained when I thanked her for her help. "I know how tough it can be. Us women have to stick together." As my 6th month began, I scheduled an ultrasound appointment. I had been receiving basic prenatal care at a community clinic, but this would be my first detailed scan. Rachel offered to accompany me, sensing my nervousness. "First time seeing your baby?" the technician asked cheerfully as she spread gel on my rounded abdomen. I knotted my throat tight with emotion. Despite everything I had come to cherish this pregnancy, talking to my baby at night and making plans for our future together. The technician moved the wand across my belly, her expression changing from routine to surprise. "Oh, well, this explains why you are showing so prominently for 6 months. Is something wrong?" I asked, instant fear gripping me. "Not wrong at all," she assured me. "But you are carrying twins. See here and here, 2 separate amniotic sacs, 2 babies." Twins. The word echoed in my head as the technician pointed out 2 distinct heartbeats, 2 tiny spines, 2 perfect profiles. Rachel squeezed my hand as tears slid down my cheeks. Joy and terror battled within me. 2 babies meant twice the responsibility, twice the expenses, twice the challenge for a single mother with limited resources. That evening alone in my apartment, I made one final attempt to reach Ethan. Surely he deserved to know he had not 1 but 2 children on the way. I composed a brief factual email to the personal address he had once given me, explaining the situation without accusations or pleas. I attached a copy of the ultrasound showing clearly that I was carrying twins. The email bounced back immediately. Address unknown. My last connection to Ethan severed completely. The following week, I was at the clinic for a follow-up appointment when fate intervened in a way I could never have anticipated. As I waited in the reception area, a tall man in an expensive suit entered and spoke quietly to the receptionist. Something about his profile caught my attention, and with a jolt of recognition, I realized who he was. Daniel Harrison, Ethan's personal attorney, whom I had met briefly at several company functions. He had not noticed me, and my first instinct was to leave immediately. But as I gathered my belongings, he turned and our eyes met. His expression shifted from confusion to recognition to something like alarm. "Alexandra," he said, approaching cautiously. "Alexandra Miller." I nodded stiffly, one hand protectively on my now obvious belly. "Mr. Harrison." He glanced around the waiting room, then lowered his voice. "May I speak with you privately, perhaps after your appointment?" "I have nothing to say to Ethan or his representatives," I replied coldly. "Please," he insisted. 5 minutes of your time. There is a coffee shop across the street." Curiosity won out over caution. An hour later, I sat across from Daniel Harrison, a cup of herbal tea growing cold between my hands. "Ethan does not know I am here," he began, surprising me. "In fact, he does not know I have seen you." "Then why are you here?" I asked. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "I was at the clinic for my daughter's appointment. This is not a professional meeting." "So, what do you want from me?" "Information first," he admitted. "Ethan disappeared from public life 4 months ago. The official story is that he is working remotely on a new project, but the truth is more complicated." My heart stuttered. "What happened to him?" "A car accident in Switzerland. He was in a coma for 2 months. He has been in physical rehabilitation since then, recovering from multiple injuries." The news hit me like a physical blow. Ethan had been fighting for his life while I thought he had callously abandoned me. But then I remembered Margaret, the check, the NDA. "His assistant came to see me," I said. "She offered me money to disappear. That had to be under his instructions." Daniel's expression darkened. Margaret acted without authorization. She made assumptions about what Ethan would want and took matters into her own hands. When Ethan learned of her actions after regaining consciousness, he was furious. She has been dismissed. Why should I believe you? I asked, though doubt was already creeping in. Because I have nothing to gain by lying, he replied simply. Ethan does not know I am meeting you. I came here as a friend, not as his attorney. A friend, I repeated skeptically. I have known Ethan since he was a struggling entrepreneur living on ramen noodles, Daniel explained. I have never seen him as happy as he was with you. And when he discovered what Margaret had done, his first concern was finding you. Then why has he not contacted me himself? I challenged. His injuries were severe, Alexandra. He is still recovering the use of his legs. And frankly, he fears you would not believe him after what happened. I absorbed this information, slowly uncertain what to feel. Relief that Ethan had not deliberately abandoned me. Anger that no one had thought to inform me of his accident. Hope that perhaps we could rebuild what was lost. I am having twins, I said finally. 2 babies, Ethan's children. Daniel nodded, unsurprised. I suspected as much when I saw you. Twins run in Ethan's family. His mother was a twin. Does he know about the pregnancy at all? No, Daniel admitted. By the time he regained consciousness and full awareness, you had disappeared. Your number was disconnected, your apartment vacant. I lost my job, I explained. I could not afford to stay. Alexandra, Daniel said gently, would you allow me to tell Ethan about the babies? About where you are, he has been searching for you. I hesitated, years of self-protection, warring with the tiny spark of hope this conversation had ignited. I need time to think about this. Everything has changed for me. I have built a new life made plans that do not include Ethan. Daniel nodded, respecting my caution. He wrote his personal number on a napkin and slid it across the table. When you are ready, call me. No pressure, no lawyers, no NDAs. Just 2 people who need to talk. I took the napkin, making no promises. But that night, as I lay in bed, feeling my babies move within me, I allowed myself to imagine a different future than the one I had resigned myself to. A future where my children knew their father, where I was not completely alone in this journey. 2 weeks later, I called Daniel. Whatever happened next, my children deserved to know the full truth of their origins, not a story built on misunderstandings and assumptions. As my pregnancy advanced, Daniel became an unexpected ally. He visited weekly, bringing groceries or prenatal vitamins, offering practical support without pressure. He shared updates on Ethan's recovery, his progress in physical therapy, his determination to regain his strength. He asks about you every time we speak, Daniel told me, but he respects your need for space and time. By my 8th month, carrying twins had become physically exhausting. My feet and back ached constantly. The stairs to my apartment were a daily mountain to climb. Rachel helped when she could, but her demanding work schedule limited her availability. It was Daniel who found me a ground-floor apartment in a safer neighborhood, who arranged for movers who made sure I had everything I needed for the baby's arrival. He never mentioned who paid for these improvements in my circumstances, but I knew. And slowly my heart began to thaw toward the man I had once loved, the father of my unborn children. The contractions began in the middle of the night, 7.5 months into my pregnancy. I woke to a sharp pain and wetness between my legs, disoriented and frightened. Too early. It was too early for my babies to come. I called Rachel first, but got her voicemail. She was working the night shift. With shaking hands, I dialed Daniel's number. The babies are coming, I gasped when he answered. 7 weeks early. I am on my way, he said without hesitation. Call an ambulance now. Everything after that became a blur of pain and fear. The ambulance ride, the rushed admission to the hospital, the doctors' concerned faces as they monitored my twins' heartbeats. Words like premature and distress floated around me as I was wheeled into delivery. We need to perform an emergency C-section, the doctor informed me. Both babies are in breech position and your blood pressure is dangerously high. I nodded through tears, too overwhelmed to speak. A nurse held my hand as the anesthesiologist administered the spinal block. Your friend is here, she told me. He is waiting outside. Daniel. In my pain and fear, I found myself wishing it was Ethan instead. The C-section happened quickly. I felt pressure but no pain as the doctors worked. Then a tiny cry filled the operating room, followed moments later by a second weaker wail. "Two boys," the doctor announced. "They are small but fighting." I caught only a glimpse of my son's tiny red faces and minuscule fingers before they were whisked away to the neonatal intensive care unit. Both weighing under 5 pounds, they needed immediate specialized care. The next days passed in a haze of recovery, pain breast milk pumping, and anxious vigils beside 2 incubators. My sons, whom I named James and William, were fighters from their first breath. Though small, their vital signs were strong, their lung development better than expected for their gestational age. Rachel visited whenever her shifts allowed, bringing home cooked meals and encouragement. Daniel came daily, sometimes twice, sitting with me beside the incubators, his quiet presence a comfort I had not expected to need. 6 days after the birth, as I sat beside William's incubator, gently touching his tiny hand through the opening, a voice I had thought I might never hear again spoke from behind me. "Alexandra." I turned slowly, my heart pounding. Ethan stood in the doorway of the NICU, leaning heavily on a cane. He looked thinner than I remembered his face, bearing new lines of pain and worry. But his eyes, those gray eyes that had once looked at me with such love, were the same. "Ethan," I whispered, too shocked to say more. He moved toward me slowly, his limp pronounced. "Daniel told me everything. About the babies, about what happened after." He trailed off, his eyes moving to the incubator where our son lay. "May I?" I nodded mutely, watching as he approached the incubator with reverence. His hand, when he reached through the opening to touch William's tiny foot, trembled visibly. "He is perfect," Ethan murmured. "They both are." We moved to a private waiting room where we could talk without disturbing the other NICU parents. The silence between us was heavy with unspoken words, months of misunderstandings and pain. "I thought you had abandoned us," I finally said, my voice barely audible. "When Margaret came with that check, that agreement—" "I would never," Ethan replied fiercely. "Never, Alexandra. The accident happened the day after you told me about the pregnancy. I was on my way to your apartment to talk tell you that I had realized what truly mattered. Us. Our family." Tears filled my eyes. "I tried to reach you so many times." "I know." Daniel showed me the log of calls, the emails. When I woke from the coma and learned what Margaret had done, his jaw tightened. "I fired her immediately, but by then you had disappeared." "I lost everything," I told him. "My job, my apartment, my family disowned me when I went to them for help." Ethan's expression darkened. "Daniel told me some of it, that your parents threw you out, but not why." I explained about Thomas and Jessica, the lies they had spread, my parents' immediate willingness to believe the worst about me. Ethan listened in growing outrage. "All this time," he said, when I finished, "while I was learning to walk again, fighting to recover so I could find you, you were alone and suffering." "Not entirely alone," I corrected, thinking of Rachel's kindness, Daniel's support. "But yes, it was the hardest time of my life." "Alexandra," Ethan said, reaching for my hand, hesitantly, as if expecting me to pull away. "I know I have no right to ask this, but is there any chance we could start again? Not as we were before, but something new. Something better. I want to be a father to our sons. And if you will let me, I want to be in your life too." I looked at this man, changed by pain and time as I had been. The old Ethan, the billionaire who had worried about business implications and public perception, seemed gone. In his place was someone more human, more vulnerable, more real. "I am not the same person I was," I warned him. "What happened changed me. I am stronger now, more independent. I will not be shut out of decisions that affect my life or my children's lives." "I would not want you to be," he assured me. "Your strength amazes me, and I am not the same either. Nearly dying has a way of clarifying what truly matters." We agreed to start slowly. Ethan would be involved in the twins' care, present for them as a father, but our relationship would develop at its own pace. No pressure, no expectations beyond co-parenting our sons. In the following weeks, as James and William grew stronger in the NICU, Ethan proved his commitment daily. Despite his ongoing physical therapy and the demands of running his company remotely, he spent hours beside the incubators, reading to the twins, learning from the nurses how to care for such tiny babies. I watched him win over the NICU staff with his genuine concern and lack of entitlement. No one would have guessed he was one of the wealthiest men in the country from his behavior. He was simply a father worried about his premature sons, determined to be present for every milestone. The day we brought the twins home to the apartment Daniel had found for me, Ethan arrived with a surprising proposal. "I have purchased a house," he said, as we settled the sleeping babies in their cribs. "A home, not a showpiece. 4 bedrooms, a garden for the boys to play in when they are older. It is in your name, Alexandra, not mine. No strings attached. A gift for you and our sons whether or not you ever decide to let me back into your heart." The gesture moved me deeply. Not because of the material value, but because Ethan had understood what I needed most: security, independence, a home that was truly mine that no one could take away. "Thank you," I said, simply knowing he would understand all I could not yet express. That night, after Ethan had gone and the twins were sleeping peacefully in their cribs, I allowed myself to truly believe for the first time that we might find our way to happiness after all. 3 years passed in a blur of baby milestones, career developments, and carefully rebuilt trust. James and William grew from fragile preemies into robust, curious toddlers with Ethan's gray eyes and my stubborn determination. They filled my days with exhaustion and my heart with a joy I had never known was possible. The house Ethan had purchased became a true home. Located in a quiet, family-friendly neighborhood, it offered the stability I had craved during those desperate months alone. A spacious yard with a playset became the twins' favorite place, their delighted squeals a soundtrack to weekend mornings. Professionally, my life took an unexpected turn. When the twins were 18 months old, Ethan approached me with a proposal. "Blake Innovations is establishing a charitable foundation," he explained over dinner after the boys were asleep, "supporting single parents, particularly mothers who have been abandoned during pregnancy. We need a director who truly understands the challenges these women face." The offer took me by surprise. "You want me to run your foundation?" "I want you to build it from the ground up," he clarified. "Complete autonomy, your vision, your direction. The funding is secured regardless of our personal relationship." The opportunity aligned perfectly with my deepest values, born from my own experience. I accepted, throwing myself into creating a foundation that provided not just financial support but comprehensive assistance, housing, childcare, education, and emotional counseling for women in situations similar to what I had faced. Within a year, the Blake Family Foundation had become a respected organization, helping hundreds of single mothers rebuild their lives. The work was deeply fulfilling, allowing me to transform my pain into purpose. My relationship with Ethan evolved gradually. We began as co-parents focused entirely on the twins' well-being. Weekly family dinners became a tradition, followed by movie nights and weekend outings. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, friendship deepened into something more. The man who stood beside me now was different from the one I had fallen in love with years before. More grounded, more open, more willing to prioritize family over business. 2.5 years after the twins' birth, Ethan moved from his downtown penthouse into the guest house on our property, close enough to be present daily for the boys, but maintaining the boundaries I still needed. It was a compromise that worked for our unconventional family, allowing natural moments of closeness without pressure. Throughout these years of rebuilding, I had no contact with my parents or brother. The wounds they had inflicted were deep, their betrayal complete. I had created a new family, my sons Ethan, Rachel, who remained a dear friend, and Daniel, who had become like an uncle to the twins. Then one ordinary Tuesday, an email appeared in my work inbox that stopped me cold. "Alexandra, it's Mom. Please, we need to talk. Things have changed. Dad is very ill." My first instinct was to delete it without response. These people had thrown me out when I needed them most, believing the worst about me without question. Why should I care about their problems now? But curiosity and some residual sense of familial obligation led me to respond with a brief, neutral message agreeing to meet at a coffee shop near my office. I told Ethan about the contact that evening. "Are you sure you want to see her?" he asked, concern evident in his voice, "after everything they did?" "I need to know why she is reaching out now," I explained, "and then I can decide if I want them in our lives at all." The coffee shop meeting was even more tense than I had anticipated. My mother looked older, her once perfectly maintained appearance now showing signs of strain. She barely recognized me in my confident professional attire, my designer handbag, a far cry from the frightened pregnant young woman they had ejected from their lives. "Alexandra," she greeted me stiffly. "You look well." "I am well," I confirmed, making no move to hug her or show affection. "Your email said Dad is ill." She nodded, her hands fidgeting with her cup. "Heart attack. 2 months ago. He needed bypass surgery. The medical bills." She trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "I am sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it despite everything. "Is he recovering?" "Slowly. But that is not the only problem." She hesitated, pride warring with desperation. "Your father made some unwise investments before his health declined. We have lost almost everything. The house is in foreclosure." I waited, sensing there was more. "And Thomas," she continued, her voice dropping. "He has been arrested. Securities fraud. He was manipulating accounts at his firm." A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. "So Thomas the Golden Child turned out to be exactly what you accused me of being. Dishonest. A disgrace to the family name." My mother flinched but did not contradict me. "We have nowhere to go, Alexandra. No one will help us. The friends we thought we had have disappeared now that we are no longer socially valuable." "And now you remember you have a daughter," I observed coldly. "How convenient." "I know we have no right to ask," she admitted, a tear sliding down her cheek. "But you are our only hope." I studied this woman who had raised me, who had also rejected me at my lowest point. Part of me wanted to walk away to let her experience just a fraction of the abandonment I had felt. But another part, perhaps the stronger part, knew that such vengeance would only damage my own soul. "I need to think about this," I said finally. "And I would want to speak with all of you together, including Thomas and Jessica. I want the truth acknowledged before I consider any kind of help." My mother looked startled. "Jessica, Thomas's ex-girlfriend. What does she have to do with this?" "Everything," I replied grimly. "She and Thomas created the lies you so readily believed about me. I overheard them bragging about it the night before I left." Shock and confusion crossed my mother's face. "That cannot be true. Thomas would never." "Arrange a meeting with everyone present," I interrupted. "My home this Sunday. Then we will see what is true and what is not." As I stood to leave, my mother asked hesitantly, "Your home? You have your own place. And the baby." "Babies," I corrected. I had twin boys. They are 3 years old now. And yes, I have my own home. A beautiful one. "How did you manage all that alone?" she wondered, genuine bewilderment in her voice. I smiled for the first time in our conversation. Who said I was alone? That evening, I discussed the situation at length with Ethan. He listened without interruption as I recounted the meeting and my mixed emotions about seeing my family again. "I want to support whatever decision you make," he said when I finished. "But I worry about the effect on you. These people hurt you deeply." "They did," I acknowledged. "But I am not the same vulnerable young woman they threw away. I am stronger now. And honestly, I want them to see that. To see what they missed, what they threw away." Ethan nodded slowly. "And the boys? Do you want your parents to meet them?" I had been wrestling with this question all day. Yes, but with conditions. They do not get to be grandparents just by showing up. They have to earn that privilege, starting with the truth. "Then we will face them together," Ethan decided. "Show them exactly what a real family looks like." The days until Sunday passed with increasing tension. I alternated between righteous anger and unexpected grief for the family relationships I had lost. Ethan remained steadfast, neither encouraging reconciliation nor advocating for complete separation. He simply supported my process, my right to decide what these people would mean in our lives going forward. "Whatever happens," he told me the night before the meeting, "remember that you have built something beautiful. A career that helps others, a loving home for our sons, and people who love you unconditionally. Nothing they say or do tomorrow can take that away." His words fortified me for what would prove to be one of the most difficult and ultimately transformative confrontations of my life. Sunday arrived with perfect fall weather sunshine, illuminating the colorful leaves in our yard where James and William played under Rachel's watchful eye. Inside, I had prepared a simple lunch, though I doubted the gathering would last long enough to eat it. Ethan moved through the house, checking that everything was in place, his calm presence steadying my nerves. "They are here," he announced at precisely noon, having spotted a car pulling into our circular driveway. I smoothed my dress and took a deep breath. Show them in. My mother entered first, followed by my father, who moved slowly, leaning on a cane. Thomas came last. His usual confident swagger diminished his expression wary. "No, Jessica," I noted with disappointment. Her absence would make proving the truth more difficult. Their collective shock at the grandeur of our home was evident in their wide eyes and slack expressions. The soaring entryway with its crystal chandelier, the glimpse of the professionally decorated living room, the obvious quality of everything around them, told a story very different from the struggling single mother narrative they had likely imagined. "Alexandra," my father said, his voice weaker than I remembered, "this is unexpected." "Welcome," I replied formally, making no move to embrace any of them. "Please come in." I led them to the living room, where Ethan waited standing tall despite the slight limp that remained from his accident. The tension in the room thickened as my family registered his presence, confusion evident on their faces. "This is Ethan Blake," I introduced simply, "the father of my children." My mother gasped audibly. "Ethan Blake, the tech billionaire." Thomas's face had drained of color. "That is not possible. You cannot be." "We met when Alexandra worked at Wellington Financial." Ethan confirmed, his voice cool but controlled. "We were in a committed relationship when she became pregnant." My father sank heavily onto the nearest chair, the implications hitting him all at once. "All this time, you were telling the truth." "Yes," I said flatly, "I was. But you chose to believe lies instead." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We did not know," Thomas said. "I know exactly what Thomas said," I interrupted, "and so does he." "Where is Jessica?" I specifically asked for her to be here. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "We broke up years ago. I have no idea where she is now." "Convenient," Ethan remarked dryly. An uncomfortable silence fell, broken only by the distant sound of the twins laughing in the garden. My mother glanced toward the sound, hunger in her expression. "Are those our grandsons?" she asked tentatively. "Biologically, yes," I conceded. "But you have never acted as their grandparents. You did not even know they existed until this week." "That was not our fault," my father protested weakly. "You disappeared." "After you threw me out," I reminded him sharply. "After you called my unborn children illegitimate and refused to believe I knew who their father was." Thomas cleared his throat. "Look, Alex, we all made mistakes. Things got out of hand, but we are family. Surely, now that everything is cleared up, we can move forward." The casual dismissal of the pain they had caused ignited my long-suppressed anger. "Cleared up. You deliberately lied about me. You and Jessica invented rumors to turn our parents against me when I was at my most vulnerable. And I turned to my parents. You believed those lies without question, without giving me the benefit of the doubt, without basic parental love." "We were shocked, disappointed," my mother tried to explain. "We did not know what to think." "You could have thought, 'This is our daughter. We will support her regardless,'" Ethan suggested quietly. "That is what parents do." My father bristled at being lectured by an outsider. "You have no idea what it was like. The shame, the community gossip." "I know exactly what it was like for Alexandra," Ethan countered. "Alone, pregnant, rejected by her family, thinking I had abandoned her too because of my accident. Living in a dangerous neighborhood, working despite morning sickness, giving birth prematurely with only friends to support her. That is what I know." The stark reality of what I had endured, laid out by Ethan's words, silenced my family momentarily. In that silence, the patio doors opened, and Rachel appeared with the twins, unaware of the tense confrontation taking place. "Sorry to interrupt," she began, then froze as she registered the strangers in the living room. James and William, curious about the new faces, peeked from behind Rachel's legs. My heart clenched at their innocence, their utter unawareness of the complicated history unfolding before them. "It is all right, Rachel," I assured her. "These are my parents and my brother. They were just leaving." "But we have not discussed," my mother began desperately. "Your financial situation," I finished for her. "No, we have not. Nor have we addressed the truth about why you are really here. Not for reconciliation. Not to meet your grandchildren. But because you need money." Thomas flushed angrily. That is not fair. Mom and Dad genuinely want to reconnect. Only after they lost everything else, I pointed out. 3 years of silence when they thought I was struggling. Now that they know who fathered my children, suddenly family matters again. My father stood shakily, pride warring with desperation. We made mistakes, Alexandra. Terrible ones. But we are still your parents. Biology does not entitle you to a relationship, I replied calmly, especially after what you did. Ethan moved to stand beside me, a united front. Alexandra and I have discussed your situation. We are prepared to help financially on certain conditions. My parents and Thomas looked up with identical expressions of surprised hope. First, I began complete honesty. Thomas admits to his lies to the whole family and to Jessica if we can locate her. Thomas started to protest, but fell silent under my unwavering gaze. Second, you will accept whatever boundaries we set regarding James and William. You do not automatically get grandparent privileges. Those must be earned through consistent, respectful behavior. My mother nodded eagerly. Of course, anything. Third, Ethan continued. Thomas will volunteer at our foundation's community service projects while he gets back on his feet. 20 hours a week helping the very people he once looked down on. Thomas looked like he wanted to object, but knew he was in no position to negotiate. And finally, I concluded family therapy. All of us together working through the damage that has been done. I am not interested in superficial reconciliation that ignores the hurt beneath. My father, always the proud one, struggled visibly with this last condition. Is that really necessary? We could just move forward, start fresh. That is not how healing works, I said firmly. We address the past honestly, or we have no future. After a long moment, he nodded reluctantly. Very well. We accept your terms. The agreement reached. Ethan outlined the financial support they would receive: a modest but comfortable apartment, basic living expenses, and help with my father's medical bills. Enough to provide stability but not luxury, and all contingent on meeting our conditions. As they prepared to leave, my mother hesitated, looking longingly at the twins who were now playing quietly in the corner under Rachel's supervision. Could we just meet them properly? Before we go, she asked tentatively. I considered refusing but saw no benefit in such pettiness. Briefly, but they know you only as visitors today, not as grandparents. That relationship will develop slowly, if at all. The twins approached cautiously at my call, half hiding behind Ethan and me as I introduced them. James, William. These are my parents and my brother. Can you say hello? Hello, they chorused, obediently. Then William added with childish directness, Why does that man look sad? My father, the target of this innocent observation, knelt painfully to the boy's level, because I made mistakes that I very much regret. But I hope someday you might let me be your grandfather. James looked to me questioningly. Is he really, Mommy? We will talk about that later, I promised, signaling that the visit was over. After they left, Ethan gathered me in his arms as emotion finally overwhelmed me. You were magnificent, he murmured into my hair. So strong, so clear. I do not know if I did the right thing, I confessed. Part of me wanted to shut them out completely. The right thing is whatever brings you peace, he assured me, and leaves the door open for growth for both sides. The following months were a careful dance of boundaries and gradual reconnection. Thomas, to my surprise, took his foundation work seriously, showing genuine remorse as he confronted the privilege that had blinded him to others' struggles. My parents attended every therapy session uncomfortable, but committed to the process of understanding the damage they had caused. Progress came in small moments. My father apologizing without qualifications for the first time in his life. My mother learning to respect my parenting decisions rather than imposing her own views. Thomas admitting the jealousy and insecurity that had driven his betrayal. 6 months after that first confrontation, Ethan proposed. Not with grand gestures or public spectacle, but quietly in our garden while the twins played nearby. We have built something beautiful from broken pieces, he said, offering a simple but elegant ring. I want to make it official if you will have me. I accepted without hesitation the journey from betrayal to this moment of perfect happiness, feeling both impossibly long and surprisingly swift. The man before me was not the same one who had once worried about business implications and public perception. He was deeper, stronger, more authentic. And I was not the same woman either. The pain I had experienced had transformed me, burning away insecurities and people-pleasing tendencies, leaving a core of unshakable strength. I had learned to trust my instincts, to stand firmly in my truth, to build boundaries that protected what mattered most. My relationship with my family remained complicated, a work in progress. Some wounds were too deep for perfect healing, but we had found a way forward based on truth rather than pretense. They would never again be the central figures in my life, but they had a place in its outer circles, growing slowly closer as trust was rebuilt brick by brick. The greatest lesson of my journey was not about revenge or vindication, though both had their momentary satisfaction. It was about the power of truth to eventually break through even the most carefully constructed lies, about the strength that comes from weathering abandonment and emerging whole on the other side, about building family bonds based on actions and choices rather than mere obligation or biology. As I watch my sons playing in the garden of the home Ethan and I have created, I no longer feel the sting of old rejections. The people who once discarded me now stand humbled by the life I built without them. But more importantly, I stand proud of that life of the woman who refused to be broken by betrayal, who found strength in her darkest moments, and who created joy from the ashes of loss. Have you ever had to rebuild trust with someone who deeply hurt you? Was forgiveness possible, or did you find it healthier to move forward without them? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story touched you or reminded you of your own journey, please like, subscribe, and share to help others who might be facing similar challenges. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that sometimes the most beautiful lives are built from the pieces of broken dreams.